They like the magic cards. And all the other trading cards too. It's me, K-Bit the Pug. I'm here today with my daddy. Daddy says it's way too early to get to the park. So it's only 6:04. So Daddy's gonna feed me some bacon periodically, and Daddy's gonna do the Super Deck Sunday video for you guys. So let me do the introduction. Let me do it. I got this. I got this, Daddy. You ready? It's time for Super Deck Sunday. Sunday. That's right. I do the Super Deck Sunday introduction good. Yes, I did. And so he's going to present the deck, and periodically I'm going to eat some bacon, and you guys get to watch me, because I'm in the mood where Daddy's going to hand it to me by hand, because I don't want to eat it off the blanket. So yeah. So Daddy, I did a good job. Give me a piece of bacon now. See? Bacon. Now. That might be a little too big. Yeah, that's a good idea. Spit that up. Spit that up, Daddy. There we go. And the last one. See? I did good. Okay. Now, Daddy, use a napkin for your greasy fingers. And then you can put up your camera and start doing your deck stuff. And then make sure you come back to me, because I want more bacon. And the humans want to see me eat the bacon, because the humans like me. Alright, guys. I got a special one for you today. This is actually one of my personal favorite decks. I'm actually going back through my entire collection. I started with the zombie deck, and I'm currently working on decks 4 and 5, which are my rogue and werewolf deck respectively, and I'm just giving them all a quick sort of tune-up, going back through my entire collection now that I've sorted it better, and just making sure that each deck has the exact flavor I want it to have, kind of thing. I'm not necessarily trying to optimize them to be the best deck ever. I'm just trying to make them into the deck that they were meant to be, per se. I am going to open a pack of Destiny for you guys at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that if you're in here more for the pack openings. But in terms of deck builds, this is probably one of the better ones. I think you guys will really enjoy this one. So, I'm just going to put the deck, I'm going to try and balance it over here as best I can. And then I'm just going to put the cards back into the deck box as we go through them. So starting with the commander, which is Ellivere of the Wild Court. This is probably one of my favorite decks by far, because she's just super cute. And most of the stuff in here is like really cute looking. And the insanity of how virtuous rolls work is by far what makes this deck function. But at the same time, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in here that just, if I can't get Ellivere out for whatever reason, I could still probably pull this off fairly successfully. But she is a commander that definitely wants to be on the field. So whenever she enters or attacks, I get to put a virtuous roll token attached to target creature I control. A virtuous roll is an enchantment that gets to go on top of the creature, and that enchanted creature with the virtuous roll gets +1/+1 for each other enchantment I control. So the virtuous roll itself is going to give a +1/+1 buffer, but if there are multiple enchantments on the field, that creature is going to get +1/+1 for each of those enchantments. And so that kind of gets pretty insane. There's a lot of token involved. There's a lot of I use a lot of colored marbles and dice in this deck to track a bunch of stuff going on, and yeah. Whenever an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So again, I can do that a lot of times in a turn, and yeah, this deck, like I say, it really likes to pop off when it gets going. I do have a Virtuous Roll Royal Roll token, a Monster Roll Sorcerer Roll token, and a Virtuous Monster token. And a couple copy tokens on the backside. I think this deck might require a couple other tokens. I haven't gone through my token box yet to add all the tokens to each deck, per se. But I will do that eventually. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. You are very hungry, aren't you? You want another bacon? You want another bacon? Nom 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 nom. Don't drop it, okay? You drop it, I have to go dig for it. Good boy. We'll start with the lands, and then we'll work our way along. Whoop, the camera just went all wonky. Oh, baby boy. Well, that's why I want to break it up and put it on the mat for you, because it's easier for me to actually, do stuff while you're distracted. But you're very insistent that I have to hand it to you today, so you're going to have to wait patiently. Yeah, I know. Patience isn't your favorite thing. All right. We're going to do the lands first. And there's not too much crazy stuff in the lands, but the last land in particular is probably one of my favorites, and it definitely makes this deck hum when I can get it working. So, we got our planes. Some beautiful artwork on all these planes. I definitely pick some of my favorite artworks for this deck to add in, and I might change a couple of the lands at some point in the near future. I think some of the what is that? Ixalan lands I'm not super fond of anymore, but it definitely is some of my favorite lands in my collection in this deck. I like that forest a lot with the mountain in the background. It's really pretty. As you venture deeper under the boughs of Neverwinter, arrows in a tree trunk suggest you might not be welcome. So I've got Blossoming Sands to give me a life. I've got a Temple of Plenty to scry. I've got a Fortified Village, which if I've got a Forest or Plains, which I've got plenty of those, I should be able to put in untapped. Canopy Vista also probably should be able to get in untapped. And then the piece de resistance in this deck, for land-wise, is the Hall of Heliod's Generosity. Taps for colorless, but I can also pay 1 and a white to tap it and put target enchantment from my graveyard on top of my library. So it's a fantastic way to get a whole bunch of stuff back in this deck. I'm just going to quickly do this again because I'm not sure if you guys got to see the lands. I keep forgetting that I'm super zoomed in to the regular 1+, so you guys can enjoy the Kaiba eating bacon thing. That was the forest I was talking about that I really, really love. But yeah, pretty solid land set for this deck, but the Hall of Heliod's Generosity is definitely the key player in the deck in terms of lands. Next, we're going to get into the sorceries and the instants because there's actually a really small collection of those. We got a Heritage Reclamation. I destroy an artifact enchantment, or I can exile a card from a graveyard to draw a card. I've got Karametra's Blessing. Creature gets +2/+2. If it's an enchanted creature or an enchantment creature, it also gets indestructible and hexproof. Chances are I'm protecting something with that really easily. Season of Renewal. Target creature gets returned from my graveyard to my hand, or I can return an enchantment can come back from my graveyard to my hand. I can get both, which makes that insanely valuable for 3. Inspiring Awe. I thought about replacing this with Heroic Intervention, to be perfectly honest. I'm not going to lie. But what I really like about this card in particular is it prevents combat damage that would be dealt this turn except by creatures that are enchanted. And enchantment creatures. So basically my stuff can swing and still deal damage that turn. And therefore it's a fantastic way for me to protect my stuff while also eliminating my opponent's stuff, which I think is better than Heroic Intervention in my opinion for this deck. I've got a Sanctify, which just destroys an artifact or enchantment and gives me 3 life. That should have probably been up here with the Heritage Reclamation. I've got a Winds of Wrath. Oh, I know why. That's because that's sorcery speed versus instant. Yeah, that makes more sense. I've got a Winds of Wrath to clear the board. Again, all my stuff is going to be enchanted, so pretty solid chance none of my stuff's going to get wiped out, but most of other people's stuff, good chance I've got a board clear there. I love Unfinished Business. I get a target creature back from my graveyard to the battlefield, and then I can get 2 or equipment cards from my graveyard to the battlefield attached to that creature as well for 5. Mega value on that one. And finally, this is my favorite one by far in this deck in terms of sorceries and instants, Retether, which just gets me every aura from my graveyard back and lets me put them onto whatever creatures I want. So I can just set up my board however I like with all the enchantments that I've lost back on the field for 4. It's phenomenal in this deck. Okay, technically not all. There are some enchantments that aren't auras, but there are a lot of auras in this deck you're going to see, so. Next up, we're going to get into the creatures, and then I'm going to end with the enchantments. I decided I was going to do this a little differently, so give me 1 second. I'm going to flip this around and do these differently. So first off, we got the randomness arc. I've got 3 arcs to this. I've got the randomness arc, and then there's 2 others. So the randomness arcs, we're going to start with Radagast the Brown. This deck has a variety of creature types, from Unicorn to Archon to there's a bunch of different types of humans. So he's going to probably proc off quite frequently. And I like that a lot, actually, about him. So it helps me get through my deck. It helps me get some of the better creatures out into play earlier on, too, if I can get him out early. Fantastic card all around. Next up, I've got my 2 lieutenants. I've got a Loyal Unicorn and a Loyal Guardian. So the Loyal Unicorn gives all my creatures vigilance if my commander's out and prevents combat damage that will be dealt to them. And then on my combat, the Guardian gives a +1/+1 counter to all my creatures. So basically, all my creatures are going to get buffed if he's out with my commander with extra +1/+1 counters. And if this one's out with my commander, all my creatures do not have to tap when they swing. And none of the combat damage that would be dealt to me during my turn would happen. So it's another one that works really well, like the instant that we saw earlier, the Inspiring Awe. Sigardian Paladin really loves the Loyal Guardian because if a +1/+1 counter got put onto a creature this turn, this card gets trample and lifelink. And then I can pay 1 and a green and a white to give a target creature +1/+1 counter and trample and lifelink until end of turn as well. So very versatile. Gilliwain came with the deck, and it's too good not to include. Whenever this thing or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under my control, I get to put a royal roll, a sorcerer roll, or a monster roll onto that creature. So just a fantastic way to get more enchantments into play really fast. And yeah, I've considered running this as a commander before, but I've tried it and I personally like Ellivere better. So that's the reason why he's backup. Knickknack Ophi, X in green, comes into play with X +1/+1 counters on it, sorry. And then I can reveal the top X cards in my library, put any number of aura cards with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield. And the rest of the cards that weren't put onto the battlefield go to the bottom of my library. As long as I can pay a bunch of mana into this guy, I can really proc off a lot of stuff in my deck when he comes out. Temperamental Oozewig is fun, goes really well with Loyal Guardian because it's going to give all my creatures trample if they're modified. That being said, they don't need to have +1/+1 counters because they're all going to have auras on them anyways, but Core Spirit Dancer just gets really buffed really fast. +2/+2 for each aura that's attached to it, and whenever I cast an aura spell, I get to draw cards. So that helps me get through my deck a little faster. Leonor Autumn Sovereign also lets me get through my deck a little faster because at the beginning of combat, I put a +1/+1 counter on a creature I control, and then if I have 3 or more creatures with different powers, I get to draw a card. Timber Paladin is fantastic in this deck. Whenever it's enchanted by exactly 1 aura, its power and toughness become 3/3 instead of 1/1. If it's enchanted by exactly 2 auras, it gets to become a 5/5 with vigilance. And if it has 3 or more auras, it becomes a 10/10 with vigilance and trample. So it just gets buffed. Plus whatever those auras do as well, which we're going to see the enchantments last, and the enchantments are pretty insane in this deck too. Danitha is fantastic in this deck. She reduces the cost of all my aura and equipment spells by 1. Plus she has First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink to start off. So when she gets enchanted with some stuff, she's going to get really powerful. Aura Gnarlid is another one that becomes insane in this deck. He can't be blocked by a creature with lesser power. And he's going to get +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield initially. Plus, if I get him with a Virtuous roll, then he's getting 2/2 for every aura on the field, and then +1/+1 for any extra enchantments. So he gets pretty huge. Citizen Champion, 2 and a green. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on him and draw a card, so he gets to really help me get through my deck too. We're going to get into the second arc now. I call this the Yuna arc. But first, a bacon break for the pug, because he's been very patient. Yes, you've been very patient. You want a piece of bacon? You got it? You don't got it. Here, let me split it. Here. Oh. You getting annoyed? You want to get going? I get the video done as quickly as I can. We're already halfway through the deck, for what it's worth. What I love about Yuna is able to give Ward 2, Trample, and Lifelink to all my enchantment creatures. So it doesn't apply to any of the ones that are enchanted, which is why this set is kept separate. But the next stack of creatures, which I'm just going to show you, is still a pretty thick stack, is all enchantment creatures with the exception of Yuna. So, and what I love about enchantment creatures is the majority of them have Bestow, which means you can actually play them as an enchantment on top of one of your other creatures first. And then if that creature happens to die, those enchantment creatures still come back to the battlefield as actual creatures with their own abilities too. So, at the beginning of the end step, return up to 1 target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. That's just gravy, to be honest. That second ability is just gravy on this card, but the first ability is the real reason why she's in this deck, because that is insane. Ward 2, Trample, and Lifelink is phenomenal, especially when I get all the Virtuous Roll stuff going again. Nalia, Forerunner, another one that just is in here mainly because she gives Trample to everything, or he. They didn't give me a gender, so yeah. It has Trample, and all my other creatures have Trample, so basically it's another, you're going to see I have a Garruk's Uprising in here too, but it's just another card that's going to give Trample to my entire board, which is essentially how I want to win. I want to win through massive combat damage because of all the Virtuous Roll stuff that's going on. And keep in mind, every one of these enchantment creatures counts as an enchantment towards the Virtuous Roll too, so they're giving extra buffs on top of that for that reason as well. Jukai Naturalist, 2/2 with Lifelink, and then enchantment spells cost 1 less to cast, so it's just another reducer. Same with Transcendent Envoy, is reducing all my aura spells, so not every enchantment, but most of my enchantments are going to probably get reduced by at least 2 or 3 even, potentially. Plus that guy has flying, which is pretty solid. Nyx Herald, at the beginning of combat on my turn, enchanted creature or enchantment creature I control gets +1/+1 to trample until end of turn. He can do it to himself technically, but he can also give it to whatever creature is on the board. So if I don't happen to have the Free Runner or the Jukai or the, we saw earlier, I think it was the Oozewag, if I don't have those out, I still can do trample to at least one creature. Nyxborn Unicorn, 2/2 Bestow for 3 and a white, or you can play it for 1 and a white. This creature gives +2/+2 and Mentor to whatever it's attached to, and Mentor just means that when it attacks, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature that has lesser power. If you can get this one buffed up, and then the newer creatures come out, you're just giving +1/+1 counters to the newer creatures each turn. Nyxborn Hydra is insane. X in green or X in 2 green to bestow it. Reach and trample, and +1/+1 counters come into play with this thing, so yeah. The enchanted creature is also going to get +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on this. So the +1/+1 counters still are attached to this, not to the creature you enchant. But this thing is going to be buffed as fudge. Celestial Archon, another fantastic one for this deck. It does cost quite a bit to put into play, but if you do bestow it onto a creature, you're giving that creature +4/+4 flying and first strike. So pretty insane. Eidolon Blossoms, I love this guy. He's just giving me a card draw for every enchantment that comes into play. Keep in mind, it's not based on cast, so all the Virtuous rolls, Sorcerer rolls, etc. are also going to give me a card draw. So again, I'm getting through this deck fairly fast, and if I had an extra Reliquary Tower, I might put it into this or something like that to not make me discard all the time. But I do have ways of getting stuff back from the graveyard, as you've seen as well, so I'm not super concerned about it. Sanctum Weaver is probably one of the biggest hits in this deck for me, because I can add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments I control. On the face of it, as soon as this comes into play, it taps for 1 at least. And then, again, with all the different enchantments and roll tokens and stuff, this thing can tap for, I think at one time I've tapped it for like 15 mana, 20 mana at one point. So, like, you get a lot of value out of this guy. Destiny Spinner is another phenomenal one for this deck because it prevents all my enchantment spells and creature spells from being countered once it's on the board. So this deck does not run, as you've seen, a lot of like counter magic or anything like that. I'm not running a huge amount of interaction per se. There is some destruction effects and such, but not a major amount of it. And that's mainly because I'm leaning on this heavily and a couple other cards to protect this. So Eidolon of the Countless Battles, I love this guy. He gets +1/+1 for each creature I control and for each aura I control. So all of the roll tokens again are going to give him +1/+1, plus he gets +1/+1 for just being on the board. When he comes into play, he's going to be giving himself +1/+1, but he can also be bestowed, which means that's just going to give something huge. And then we get into the final arc, which is just like the big hitters. So if that stuff was like crazy before, this stuff is going to be insane. First off, we're starting with Elspeth Resplendent, which is the only planeswalker in the deck. I could choose one creature and put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then a counter that gives it either flying, first strike, lifelink, or vigilance. That is just massive value for sure in this deck. And then -3, I'm probably not going to do too often, but you can look at the top 7 cards of your library, put a permanent from among them with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield with a shield counter on it. And the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I mean, if you could potentially hit, say, the Sanctum Weaver with that, that's fantastic. And then finally, -7, create 5 3/3 white angel creature tokens with flying. Again, probably not going to do that too often, but if I do, that gives me a whole bunch of extra creatures that I can attach virtuous rolls and other stuff to. So, pretty phenomenal value all around. Next up, Shalai, Voice of Plenty, gives me planeswalkers I control and other creatures I control hexproof. So that is the big protector in this deck to protect Sanctum Weaver, protect Destiny Spinner and other things, is the Shalai. And then Shalai also lets me put a +1/+1 counter in each creature I control if I can pay the 6. I'm not going to probably do that, but just saying, the offer is there, and that is pretty good. Next up, we have Silverback Elder, 2 and 3 green for a 5/7. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you get to choose one. And again, we've got a ton of creatures in this deck. So I can destroy an artifact or enchantment. I can look at the top 5 cards in my library and put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Or I can gain 4 life. No matter what, this card is giving me massive value in this deck. The land count for this deck, I think, is 35 or 36, if I remember correctly. So it's decent, but it's not insane. And I don't have a lot of artifacts or other stuff. I basically have the one major mana dork in here, and that's essentially it for mana producers. But that right there helps me get the lands out. And it also helps me deal with anything on the board that is being a little bit problematic in terms of artifacts and enchantments. Next up, the Golden-Tailed Trainer. This guy is going to pop off huge in this deck when he gets out on the board. First off, all my aura and equipment spells cost X list to cast, which is based on his power. So as soon as I get a virtuous roll on him, basically all my stuff is free except for the green or white pips that I have to pay. And then whenever he attacks, all my other modified creatures get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is his power. So as soon as I swing with him, everything else is getting a massive buff based on his power, which again, once you give all the stuff trample, it just overruns everybody. There's just nothing they can do about it, really, if they can't stop my combat. I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm going to apologize in advance for getting it wrong, but I think it's Pesmilla Melatonin Poet. I recently added this one to the deck, and it's probably one of my new favorite includes. Whenever I cast my first enchantment each turn, which does include all those enchantment creatures, I get to put a 2/2 white nymph enchantment creature token onto the battlefield, which just gives me another enchantment on the board. So more value for my virtuous stuff. And then at the beginning of each combat, if I control 5 or more enchantments, this thing gets a +4/+4 buff and lifelink until end of turn. So once I get a virtuous roll on this, it's just getting an extra +4/+4 and lifelink when I swing, which is phenomenal. Next up, I included this for the memes, and because I think it's a really funny way to just collapse anybody else's strategy that isn't based on enchantments or artifacts or +1/+1 counters. And basically what it does is all my other creatures have base power, or all the other creatures on the board have base power toughness 2/2 and become bears in addition to their other types. So when this comes out, it will reduce some of my creatures' power. Like some of them are, for example, 3/4, 4/4. Like some of them are going to get nerfed. But the nerf really doesn't matter too much in the face of everything that's going on the board. Whereas the nerf for other people might be devastating once the trample and stuff gets kicked in. So Kudo is kind of like a win con in this deck for me because of that reason. I've got Codsworth Handy Helper in here too. I love this guy. Gives Ward 2 to my commander. Taps to add 2 white, and I can spend that on aura or equipment spells only, which there's a lot in here as you've seen. Or you haven't seen that yet, but you're going to see. And attach, or I can tap it to attach an aura or equipment spell I control to target creature I control. So I can like move things around essentially from one creature to another, I think, if I understand that correctly. If I want to move a virtuous roll token, for example, I can move it to a different creature on the board. Like, that is really versatile in this deck. Next up, Umbra Mystic. This is probably one of the best cards in this deck if I can keep it on the board, because every aura that I have on the board gives totem armor. So all those virtuous rolls, monster rolls, etc., all of them will essentially mean that if my creature dies, the token falls off and the creature stays on the board. And then I just have to put another token back on. So as long as I can keep this on the board, essentially none of my stuff will ever go to the graveyard. And then finally, I put in a Thronebreaker of Silence as another win con. Basically, I can buff the snot out of this thing and it becomes unstoppable. Because it has trample, it has indestructible on my turn, and it can't be the target of anybody's spells unless they're playing green. Or abilities unless they're playing green. Now, I can target it with white stuff in my deck, which is fantastic, but they can't target it with anything, which means I can buff the snot out of this thing, and assuming my opponents aren't playing green, they can't prevent me from killing them one by one with this, at least. And that is the creature base, which is pretty insane in my opinion. I think that I did a pretty solid job of building that one up. Yuna is the other recent add-in in terms of creatures. Most of those creatures have actually been in the deck for a while. But Yuna and the Pessimila are both new creatures to the deck that I'm looking forward to seeing how they pop off once I get going with them. You want one more before I get into the enchantments? I know. But we still have like 20 minutes to kill, baby. Before your friends actually get to the park. I love your pug eyes when you see the bacon. Bacon! Okay. Yeah. I will admit, as a vegetarian, bacon is the one thing that I actually sincerely miss eating. So for me, it's always really hard when he gets bacon and I'm like, oh, the smell. And then the grease gets on your hands and you're trying to get it off. Okay, let's finish this deck profile. We're going to start with the artifacts, which there are only 3, but each of them is insane for this deck. So, we have a Holy Avenger. It gives the equipped creature double strike, and whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage, I get to put an aura from my hand onto the battlefield attached to it. Basically, I can play my auras for free if this is out, and I can somehow deal damage with it. Which, if I attach this, for example, to Thrun, he is going to definitely deal some damage. With his trample, probably. Unless he gets insanely blocked. Next up, Haunted Cloak, which gives whatever creature I attach this to Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. So basically I can swing the turn anything comes out if I want to, because it's only equipped 1, which is fantastic. Costs 3 to put into play, but once it's in play, it's really easy to just move around wherever I need it to be. And Vigilance and Trample is phenomenal, of course, in this deck. So another thing that's giving Trample, why not? And then the Thram Power Suit, which basically acts like a Virtuous Roll, except it actually includes my equipment too. So the equipped creature is going to get +1/+1 for every aura and equipment attached to it specifically. And it also has a Ward 2 buff. So if I put this onto Thrawn, for example, now Thrawn has an extra Ward 2, and he's getting super buffed for anything else that he's got attached to him. So again, Thrawn is basically like my closer, but I mean, the deck functions really well even if I can't get Thrawn out. Same with Kudo. Kudo just really helps me freaking roll over everybody on one turn if I can get him out and nobody sees it coming. But again, like, it's just, the deck's so good. Enchantress's Presence, whenever I cast an enchantment, I get to draw a card. So it's not going to, unfortunately, be triggered by any of the Virtuous Rules, but it will be triggered by all my enchantment creatures. Kenra's Transformation to deal with something pesky on my opponent's side of the field. Plus I get a card. Group's Uprising gives me more cards. Also gives all my creatures trample. Granted, base power and toughness 4/4. I don't have a lot of creatures at that level, but a lot of these creatures are going to get rolls as they come in and stuff. So there's a good chance, or +1/+1 counters as they come in, I mean. So there's a good chance that they'll get there. Spectral Steel is a fun one. It doesn't really do too much on the field. It gives a +2/+2 buff. What it's really in here for is the fact that I can exile it from my graveyard to return any other aura or equipment from my graveyard to my hand. So it lets me get back the Holy Avenger, lets me get back the Thrawn Power Suit. It's going to let me get back some of the really big ones that you're going to see later on. And that's the main reason I included it in this deck. Careful Cultivation, I like this one a lot, actually. I'm going to enchant it to a creature. I'm never going to enchant it to an artifact. I don't know why you would. Whatever creature you give it to gets +1/+3 and Reach as a buff. And in addition to that, you can tap it for 2 green if you need to on anybody on any turn, should you need the extra mana. Cather's Call is nice because it gives me a whole bunch of extra bodies. It gives Vigilance to whatever creature it's enchanted to, and at the beginning of my end step, I get a white human creature token every turn. So there's another body that's coming into play constantly, and in addition to that, that's more creatures that I can attach Virtuous Rolls to, which just gives more buffs, etc., etc. Timely Ward is nice because it's going to give my commander indestructible if I get it onto the field at the right time. Basically, it's going to sit in my hand until I need it, and it is essentially there specifically to protect Ellivere. Snake Umbra is one of the enchantments that does actually have Totem Armor built in. It gives +1/+1, and whenever the creature deals damage to my opponent, I get to draw a card. With Ellivere on the field, that means I'm drawing 2 cards when that creature deals damage, which is pretty nice. Songbird's Blessing. That is pretty solid too. Whenever my enchanted creature attacks, I get to reveal cards from the top of my library to reveal another aura, which there's a lot of auras in here. And I get to put that card directly onto the battlefield. If I don't, I put it into my hand, and the rest of those cards go on the bottom in a random order. But again, like, this is just going to get more auras onto the field, get more buffs going. Giant Inheritance is probably one of my favorite enchantments in this deck because it gives +5/+5 to the creature that it's attached to. And in addition, whenever that creature attacks, it's going to give me a monster roll token. So if I attach this to Ellivere, Ellivere is going to be giving me a monster roll and a virtuous roll every time she attacks. And whenever this gets put into a graveyard from the battlefield, it comes back to my hand, which is really nice. So I'm always going to have access to monster rolls because of that. Unflinching Courage, I like this one too. Gives a +2/+2 buff and trample and lifelink, so you're going to definitely be doing some pretty solid damage with that on the field. Dawnbreak Coronet. Now this one's a little tricky because you have to pick a creature that already has an aura attached to it before you can play this. But whatever you give this to is going to get massive buffs as a result of that. And again, if you have any of the roll tokens attached to something, those count as auras. So yeah. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3, has first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. major buffs. Again, get this onto Thrun, and Thrun is doing some crazy nonsense. Angelic Destiny, I love this one too. It works similarly to the Giant Inheritance, where if the creature I'm enchanting dies, this comes back to my hand. What's nice about that, the Giant Inheritance, is if it goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, regardless, it comes back to my hand. So if somebody destroys this with instant, I still get to put it back, as long as it got to the battlefield first. Whereas this one, it requires the creature to go, but still, the creature that it's attached to becomes +4/+4, an angel in addition to its other types, and has flying and first rank. Give that to Thrun as well. Like, Bear Umbra is phenomenal in this deck because I get to untap all my lands whenever the creature attacks. So I play all my cards out of my hand, spend all my mana, swing with the creature that this is attached to, which also gets a +2/+2 buff in addition. And then I get to untap my lands and play some more stuff. Or hold up a whole bunch of mana to show like I'm going to interact with people, even though this deck doesn't really do that. Sage's Reverie is phenomenal because I get to draw an aura, or draw a card for each aura I control when this thing comes into play that's attached to a creature. And then whatever creature I enchant with this gets +1/+1 for each aura I control that's attached to a creature, which counts all my roll tokens again, so it's going to get really massive, whatever gets attached to that. Same with Ethereal Armor, but Ethereal Armor is even better because it actually counts every enchantment, not just the enchantments that are rolls and auras. So this will count all my enchantment creatures as well, and it will count all the extra enchantments like the Enchantress's Presence, for example. And it gives the creature first rank for 1. Indomitable Might lets me give the enchanted creature +3/+3 and assign combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Get this onto my commander, and my commander basically swings for commander damage all over the place like crazy. But again, I can also attach this to Thrun and let Thrun just destroy people without being stoppable. Mantle of the Ancients is probably one of the biggest ones in this deck, and there is actually one more after this, which is insane, but this is probably one of the biggest ones. This lets me get every aura or equipment card from my graveyard back to the battlefield attached to the creature I enchant with this. And then the creature I enchant with this gets +1/+1 for every aura and equipment attached to this. So basically my big move, if I can really pull it off, is get Thrun out, get this attached to Thrun, get everything from my graveyard back attached to Thrun, swing for game. That is the big move. And finally, my favorite enchantment in this deck, which is a new add-in, is Valkyrie's Call. Whenever a non-token, non-angel creature I control dies, so with the exception of that one that is enchanted by Angelic Destiny, everything else, essentially. That card comes back to the battlefield under my control. It gets a +1/+1 counter. It gains flying and becomes an angel in addition to its other types. So basically, clearing stuff off my board actually makes it more problematic for you because the stuff returns even stronger than it was before. I get ETB triggers back all over again if there are any. And once I start attaching tokens and rolls and stuff to things, again, they're just going to become that much more problematic because now they all have flying automatically. So that is my Ellivere enchantment deck. I haven't actually had the chance to upload the changes to it online yet, so I think it's probably going to be a bracket 3 at this point, if I'm lucky. Might even be a bracket 4. But I'm really hoping not. I don't think there's too many game changers in it as far as I know. But like I say, I haven't checked. So, but that is like one of my favorite decks to play, and I'm really stoked to see how it runs now that I've added the Valkyrie's Call and the few extra creatures that I've added in. And there's a couple extra enchantments that I've added in as well that I think really are going to make a huge difference in that deck, and I'm stoked to see how it plays out. So anyways, let's do this pack of Destiny and get going because Kaiba's running out of patience. Here, I'll give you another piece of bacon while you wait. There. It's split into pieces, so it's a little more challenging for you to eat. That napkin is gross now, so there we go. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Accumulated Knowledge is a solid card to start with. Draw a card, then draw cards equal to the number of cards named Accumulated Knowledge in all graveyards. Unfortunately, it only works on Modern or Standard, but still, pretty solid. We pulled that enough times that I'm not even going to go over what it does anymore, but it is pretty neat that you can basically put a card from a graveyard into the bottom of a deck repeatedly. Monster 5, +4/+4 until end of turn. It has Retrace, which is kind of nice. You can play it again from your graveyard by discarding a land card, in addition to paying its other costs. Syndic of Tithes. That's a new one for me. 1 and a white, 2/2 with Extort. Ooh, nice. I don't think I've ever actually pulled a mono-white creature with Extort, so that is cool. That is the hit of the day right now. Armor of Shadows. Until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+0 and has Indestructible. That is pretty solid though too, but does not beat the Syndicate of Tithes. Solar Blast, 3 and a red, deals 3 damage to any target, cycling 1 and 2 red. If you cycle it, you can have it deal 1 damage to any target. Okay. That's pretty versatile overall. Root Eternal, 4 and 2 green with more 5 and 2 green. If it gets turned face up, you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Ooh, and it's a 6/5. That's pretty solid stats. Greater Basilisk, 3 and 2 green, 3/5 with Death Touch. That's probably going to make it into my Death Touch deck when I edit it. Mardu Scout, 2 and 2 red. Dash 1 and a red, so you can put it into play for the dash cost, and then it goes back to your hand at the end of turn, and it gets haste when you do that. 3/1, probably not going to play that much, to be honest, but it's still better than a few of the other things we've pulled so far. Ground Shaker Sliver, all your slivers get trample. I don't play slivers, but that is probably a pretty good sliver if you did play slivers. Odious Tro, I pulled that recently. It's an interesting card. 1 black or green for a 1/1 with 1 black or green +1 to regenerate it. A second Ground Shaker Sliver, interesting. I know somebody who I would love to send some sliver cards to if they still wanted to chat with me, but they don't talk to me anymore, unfortunately. It's really sad. If anybody else likes slivers, let me know, because I am not a slivers player, and I'm not planning to become one. Typhoid Rats. Fun. I got an extra rat. Nice. I do want to eventually build a rats deck, so it's always nice to have extra copies of rats. And we end on a Seeker Squire, 1 and a black. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. Okay. It's not terrible. Gets you an extra land. I don't think there's very many cards that do that in black, so... I mean, overall, it was a decent pack. It's like a half-half. 7 cards that I'm probably not going to use, and 8 cards that I definitely probably would. So, I'm pretty happy with that. And I hope you guys are happy with this video. That is our episode of Super Deck Sunday. And with that, I am going to get Kaiba to the park because it is time to go meet our friends. So, much love to you all. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.